All right, having introduced reflection and refraction in the last chapter, we're now ready to talk about how to leverage the ability to change the direction that rays are traveling. We're going to leverage that to produce images. And so we're going to talk about how to form images in this video with a mirror, with reflection, and then the next video with refraction, with lenses. And so first off, we're going to start with the simplest case, a plane mirror, and what types of images are formed when you have a flat mirror. And so in the picture here, I've got an object, and so that's a typical terminology that we'll use. We'll have an object, and then eventually we'll get to talking about an image being formed. So for this object, I've got two locations that I'm going to sketch rays coming from. So first off, let's sketch the rays from P prime and zoom in a little bit. So I've got two rays coming from P prime, and notice since they're coming from the same location, they're diverging, so they're slowly spreading apart. And then the rays hit the mirror, and law of reflection, they're going to reflect at the same angle that they were incident. And so here are my two rays. And again, for a plane mirror, the plane mirror doesn't alter the relative spacing or divergence of the two rays. And so the plane mirror only serves to change the direction of the rays. It does not change the relative orientation to each other. So the eye, when these two rays enter, these two rays are coming from the same location on the object, and so what your eye does is trace those two rays back. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So trace those two rays back, and those rays are going to appear then to come from this spot back here. And so the ray model, you can draw an infinite number of rays. You need at least two rays from the spot on your object. You need to trace at least two rays to figure out where the image forms. So the top of the bottle here forms back here. That's where the image for this object forms with the plane mirror. And then you do the exact same thing with another spot on the object. In this case, we've got the bottom location, P. And so you do the exact same thing. You've got two rays that are diverging slightly. They hit the mirror, they reflect using the law of reflection. And again, they enter your eye, so you trace those rays back, and those rays appear to come from back here. And so now that we know by doing ray tracing where the image forms, right, we're done. And so the typical symbols that the book uses for object distance, DO, image distance, DI. Let's see, what else do we have here? For a plane mirror, and this is something that you know from experience, for a plane mirror, the image distance and the object distance are the same value, the same amount. The image distance just corresponds to being behind the mirror. So if you look at this picture here, object distance, image distance, the object and the image are on opposite sides of the mirror. So we can define magnification, the image, how large is the image compared to the object. And so the image magnification is given by this expression, just the ratio of the image and object distance. And so for a plane mirror, the ratio minus di over do is +1. So for a plane mirror, the magnification is 1. There's no increase or decrease in the size of the image relative to the object. And the plus sign here indicates that the image is the same orientation as the object. This means that the image that is formed with a plane mirror is known as a virtual image. And virtual is the word for these images because the rays appear to come from back here, but they don't physically ever travel from that location, right? It's just an artifact of tracing those rays back in straight lines, and it appears they diverge originally from that location, and that's why these are called virtual images. The next thing we want to think about is move past a plane mirror and start thinking about, well, what happens if your mirror surfaces are curved? Because with the plane mirror, even though the rays change direction, they don't change, the relative angle between the rays does not change upon reflection. And with a curved mirror, all of a sudden you can get a change in the relative direction between adjacent rays. And so you can get different phenomena. And so there's basically two types of curved mirrors that we could see, and we're going to focus on spherical. But there's parabolic, and so that means the shape of the mirror is a parabola. And the cool thing about a parabolic mirror is that rays that are parallel, so you see all of these rays that are parallel to the plane of the parabola, when they hit the mirror surface, all of those rays come to cross the same point, and that's called the focus or the focal point. And so for a parabola or for a parabolic mirror, you get that all parallel rays will pass through that dot F. You can also have spherical mirrors. And spherical mirrors have very similar property to parabolic. You can see that I've got a bunch of parallel rays. And what happens is most of those rays reflect and pass through this spot right here. So many of the rays pass through the same point, but some of the rays you can see in this picture, some of the rays, like the one here, some of these rays are intersecting here. And so you've got some rays intersecting here, some intersecting here. So what that means for a spherical surface, not all of the rays come to focus or pass through the same location. And so if you take a small chunk of a spherical mirror, so instead of a large cutout of a sphere, if you take a smaller portion, then what you get is all of the rays converging at this first point over here. And so if you limit your mirror that's spherically shaped to a small portion of the overall sphere, then you can get all of the rays to meet at one point, and again, this will be called the focal point. So let's look at spherical mirrors a little more in depth. So we've got our sphere here, and we're going to just take a slice out of the sphere on either side, and depending on which curved side is the reflective side, is the mirror side, you get different properties. And so when the reflective side is on this side, so the orange cutout here, when the reflective side is on the right, this is referred to as a concave mirror. And when the reflective side is on, in this case, the right, but on the outer edge there, then this is referred to as a convex mirror. Right? So depending on which side is the reflective side, you'll have either a concave or convex mirror, and you get different properties. So if you look at the sphere here, the radius of the sphere, referred to as the center of curvature, right? That gives you a sense of really how large the sphere is, and the amount of curvature associated with the mirror. And so a larger center of curvature it means that or larger radius means that the mirror isn't curving nearly as much as if you had a small radius of curvature. And so we mentioned in the previous page that parallel rays for a concave mirror will come to a focus at a point called the focal point. Well, that focal point is related to the radius of curvature of the mirror by the focal length is equal to r over 2. And for convex mirrors, in this picture over here, I've got parallel rays coming in and hitting the mirror, and those rays don't reflect towards a point. All of those rays reflect away as though they were coming from a point behind the mirror, and that's the focal point for a convex mirror. Again, still the focal length is equal to r over 2. It's just now the rays appear to be coming from a spot behind the mirror, as opposed to the rays for a concave mirror, the parallel rays reflect and pass through the focal point. So the first thing we do to try to get some intuition about what happens when you have a curved mirror as opposed to a plane mirror is to do ray tracing. And ray tracing just gives you an idea of, given an object someplace near your mirror, where is an image going to form? And so we're going to run through the 4 rays that you can always draw if you have a curved mirror to figure out where the image forms. And the nice thing is that you really only need 2 rays to figure out where the image forms, but you have 4 options. So the first thing that I want to mention is that this line right here, where the object is drawn from, that's known as the optical axis. And so typically we'll draw our object with the bottom of the object on the optical axis. And the reason we do it that way is because then when our image forms, essentially the bottom of our image is going to be on the optical axis. And so that's one thing that we always want to start with. And so a typical object for us to draw is an arrow, because you can easily tell whether or not the arrow is upright or inverted when you look at the image. So I've got my object, and we're some distance away from our concave mirror here, and we've drawn 4 different rays that we can always draw how they reflect off of the mirror. So ray number 1 is parallel to the optical axis, and that ray will always reflect off of your concave mirror and pass through the focal point. So that's the first ray that you could always draw. Right, so the ray leaving the top of the arrow, reflecting off of the mirror, passes through the focal point. Now, the image is going to form somewhere. We don't know where, but the image is going to form somewhere along that line. Right, and this is why we need at least 2 rays, because we need to know where along that line. Right, 1 ray is not enough. So let's go to ray number 2. These are just being drawn, they're numbered in no particular order here. Number 2 would be the ray that passes through the focal point before hitting the mirror. And this is kind of like the reverse of ray 1. Ray 1 was parallel to the optical axis before reflecting and then passed through the focal point. Ray 2 is passed through the focal point before hitting the mirror. Reflecting back will come through, or will come out parallel to the optical axis. Right, so it's sort of the reverse of ray 1. And so you draw those 2 rays and you can immediately see, oh, the image must form right there because that's where the 2 rays intersect. But there are 2 other rays that you can draw. The other 2 rays would be, I'm going to run out of colors here. Ray number 3 is the ray that passes through the center of the sphere that your mirror is cut out from. And when you pass through the center, after you hit the mirror, the ray just reflects back along the exact same line. And so that ray is just coming back along that line. Again, still intersects the other two rays at the exact same spot. And then we could draw the fourth ray. The fourth ray isn't really that special of a ray, other than when ray 4 hits the mirror, it's hitting the mirror right at the optical axis, where the mirror surface is vertical. So that means it's relatively easy to see how this ray is supposed to reflect. Again, incident angle and reflected angle are the same. So rays 1 and 2 are rays that you can always draw, easy to identify. Ray 3, sometimes you'll only know where the focal point is for your mirror. So ray 3 might be a little bit difficult to draw because you'll have to go twice as far away as the focal point to find where the center of the sphere is. And then ray 4, again, you can draw it, but it's a little difficult to make sure that you've drawn the right ray, because you basically are trying to guarantee that those two angles are the same. So this is ray tracing for a concave mirror. For a convex mirror, you have similar 4 rays, but they are slightly different. So let's walk through those 4. So again, I've got an object here placed on the optical axis. And so the first ray that I'm going to draw is the ray, just like in the previous example, a ray from the top of the arrow that's parallel to the optical axis. Well, now this ray reflects off of the mirror and reflects away from the optical axis, and it reflects in such a way that if you trace the ray back, passes through the focal point behind the mirror. So that's ray 1. Ray 2. Ray 2 is the ray that would pass through, if you see this, would pass through the far focal point, but of course hits the mirror and reflects. And so if you trace that ray back, there you can see that both the pink ray and the blue ray appear to come from this spot Q prime. And you can continue on. You can draw ray 3. Ray 3 is the ray that would go through the center of the sphere on behind the mirror. But of course, the ray hits the mirror and reflects. But that reflects back along the same line, and so that again reinforces the spot where the image is going to form. And then the fourth ray, the ray that comes down and hits the center of the mirror right at the optical axis, reflects at the same angle, and then you trace that back. Again, it appears to come from spot Q prime behind the mirror. And so in the concave mirror example, given the location where the object was, the image that formed here is what's known as a real image. Notice how the image is inverted. It's upside down compared to the object. But if you look for the convex mirror for this particular ray trace, the object is upright. It's the same orientation. The image is upright. It's the same orientation as the object, and this is known as a virtual image. So the real image, the rays physically come to focus at the spot where your image forms, right? The rays are actually there. Over here, this is a virtual image. The rays do not actually come from this location. They appear to come from that location, and that is why it's a virtual image. And so the last thing that we want to mention for image formation with mirrors is that, yeah, ray tracing is nice, and it actually can be a very simple, quick way to get some idea of where an image will form and what type of image that image will be. Will it be virtual? Will it be real? What's the magnification? But oftentimes, what we want is something more quantitative, and that is where the mirror or the thin lens equation comes in. And the thin lens equation allows you to relate the object distance, the image distance, and the focal length of your lens or mirror. And so when you're asked to solve for an image location or a focal length, typically this is the expression you're going to use. Ray tracing can be used to inform these types of problems, but almost always it's the thin lens equation that's going to provide you the most concrete answer to this type of question. So we need to mention that there are a few conventions depending on whether you have a convex or concave mirror. And the conventions, the sign conventions, are such that for concave mirrors, the focal length is a positive value. So that means if parallel rays incident on a concave mirror come to focus 5 centimeters away from the mirror, well, then the focal length is plus 5 centimeters. However, if those parallel rays are incident on a convex mirror and those rays reflect away and they appear to come from a spot 5 centimeters behind the mirror, then the focal length is minus 5 centimeters. And so when you're going to plug F into the thin lens equation, if you have a concave mirror, you're going to be plugging in a positive number for F. And if you have a convex mirror, you're going to be plugging in a negative number. The other thing is that when you get images, the image distance for a real image is going to be positive, and the image distance for a virtual image is going to be negative. And so you can use that one of two ways. You can either use the thin lens equation to solve for an image distance and you get it to be positive, immediately you know the image is real. Or if it comes out image distance negative, immediately you know it's a virtual image. The other thing that you can do with the image distance is you can determine the magnification of the image. How large or small is the image compared to the object? And so we mentioned this expression previously, but the magnification, right? How large is the image compared to how large the object is? That is simply just the ratio of the image distance to the object distance. This is called linear magnification. And this negative sign is important because the negative sign tells you essentially whether the image is upright or inverted. So if your magnification is positive, then the image is upright. And this goes along with it being a virtual image. If the magnification is negative, then your image is real. And going along with that is the image is inverted. Right? So that negative sign in the magnification tells you that the image is inverted. So going to solve for image locations using curved mirrors, spherical mirrors, this thin lens equation is what's going to be the most useful for you.